Been calling for ethics reform in Albany for years, and he sees every new scandal as an opportunity to maybe, possibly, some way manage to push through more stringent rules that might prevent lawmakers from gaming the system and behaving badly. He is Dick Dady. He's the executive director of Citizens Union, which authored the report on legislative turnover that I mentioned at the top of the show. The Downstate Good Government Group is calling for strong reform to stem the, quote, alarming trend of lawmakers forced from office by ethical transgressions. Dick, thanks very much for being here.
Nice to be here, Liz.
It's a rather unhappy circumstance.
Unfortunate, yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
okay, so this is, just to be clear, this is a 2-year report. This is the second year that you've done this. And what you're seeing is a precipitous increase in people who are forced out of office due to ethics scandals.
Yes, we're seeing an alarming rise. And in fact, it's a crime wave. If you look at the numbers over the last 6 years, we have seen 13 legislators removed or leaving office because of ethical misconduct or criminal charges. 13 over the last 6 years.
Yeah, we're looking at this graph right here so the viewers can see what we're talking about. Now, that is a serious precipitous change, but a crime wave? I mean, 4 to 13 is a crime wave? Really?
Well, it's triple. I mean, where else has crime gone up 3 times the rate over the last 6 years as ethical misconduct in Albany? Nowhere.
No.
I mean, crime across the state, for the most part, is dropping.
True, true.
Right?
But just to be fair, there are 211 lawmakers, legislators. We're specifically speaking about legislators, although at the top of the show I did mention former governors, Eliot Spitzer, David Paterson, Chris Lee, most recent congressman, former now congressman from last week, who had a little Craigslist problem. But the vast majority, we assume, of public servants are probably...
They're honorable, they're well-intentioned, and they act with high ethical standards. But the fact remains that there still are too many legislators that are running into this problem.
Right.
If you look at what it was 12 years ago, it's increased dramatically. And the thing is that the reason it exists is because there's not enough oversight, there's not enough enforcement.
Well, and in a perfect world, you wouldn't need it, right? I mean, some of this is about human nature, and if in fact there's an absence of rules and things are gray, it's easier for people to take advantage of a system that really is quite porous, actually.
It is very porous, and that's why we do need stronger ethics enforcement. And the thing is if they had to disclose more, if they had to share more, knowing that what they told us about would be publicly available, they think twice about some of the actions
But do you believe that? Because they have to now disclose. This is something Joe Bruno used to always say about campaign finance. Remember, he said the best thing that could possibly happen is reporting. I tell you exactly what I spend my money on, including the pool cover that I spent my campaign contributions on. I mean, that in that instance, he said sunlight was the best policy, but it didn't stop anybody from spending lavishly from their campaign committees.
That's correct, because it was in the rule of law.
Right.
I mean, it was legal to do it, which was their argument. But if you are doing something and that is disclosed in your conflict forms, people will find it. People will start to connect the dots. There
are actually, now we're talking about, and that's sort of something that I think that I've harped on a little bit, but we've had, ironically, ethics reform negotiations happening not in the sunlight. There are no conference committees yet on ethics reform. We're not seeing public leaders' meetings on ethics reform. We are having talks, I understand. We spoke to the leaders and the governor about it. One of the things is about disclosure of various different client lists for attorneys. You see someone like Dean Skelos saying, well, my whole firm isn't going to tell you who they are representing. That actually is not fair to the clients. Do you agree with that?
I agree up to a point. We're trying to figure out where to draw that line. I mean, I think we now know that legislators who are lawyers or who are involved in any kind of business that may have business with the state are going to be required to disclose that. That seems to be a baseline that has been achieved, a significant one that we did not have last year. The question now becomes is what about those other clients with whom that do business with the firm that the lawyers associated, that the legislator is associated with? You know, to what extent do they get disclosed?
Well, and then there's the problem that a person like Shelley Silver, the Assembly Speaker, is not in court. Neither is Dean Skelos in court. I mean, these guys are rainmakers. They refer clients to the firm, and the assumption is they probably are getting a cut of whatever commission that they're bringing in, but they are not actively arguing at the bar for various different individual clients.
No, they're not. They're the rainmaker. They're the ones they're the reason why the clients are coming to the firm. But those circumstances will be require disclosure.
Okay, so we have another graphic
Yeah.
here regarding the entire turnover cost in the span that you were looking at.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting here, and we've talked about it on this show before, you and I, and various other good government advocates, that it's just not competitive. The way that the system is set up in New York, for a host of reasons, in part redistricting, which is something that you've been pushing for a while, independent redistricting. Also, just incumbency protection. You just get better fundraising. You've got taxpayer-funded dollars to be used to send out newsletters, for example, which your challenger probably doesn't have.
Right.
So overall, there are actually more legislators who are leaving because of ethics scandals than voters who are voting them out at the voting booth. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that this legislature that took seat in January, there were 47 fresh faces.
Yeah, that's unusual.
That was a 22% turnover from 2 years ago. That's a huge change, a change we haven't seen in at least 12 years, and arguably something that may go back as far as the 1974 Watergate election. That's 22% of the legislature is turned over.
So we're looking at this graphic here now. We can turn around and see here that the largest number is the blue number. Is
Yes.
that correct? And that is the people who were ousted by ethics. Is that correct? Or is
No. Those are people who have actually left for another office.
Right.
Then the other number is the 13. I think that has left have just simply retired or resigned.
That's an interesting point, too, and one that I want to ask you, because one of the reasons that you see people like, I talked at the top of the show about Vinny Libel. Now, he was the last former state lawmaker now to plead guilty to corruption charges. He left to run for Putnam County executive. He didn't disclose to the voters that he had this little problem, but he left in part, it seems like a step down from state office to local office, but in part it's because you make a lot more money.
Exactly.
A lot.
The salaries are not very competitive.
Right.
In fact, we would argue that they need to be raised.
You do believe that.
Oh, yeah.
But in connection with a ban, with a moonlighting ban, then that lawmakers could get a big salary increase if they promised that they would not do any outside work.
Well, we don't want to limit citizen legislators from coming forward, and because there are lawyers who argue quite well that in order to function, if they were to be defeated or retire, they need to keep the law practice open. We get that. But maybe there needs to be some limits. There needs to be obviously greater disclosure. We'd love to see stipends taken away.
So the Lulus is what you're talking about, right? For leadership, for committee ranking
committee
positions
chairs and majority positions.
So what if there was one thing that you're hoping for the most? Is it what exactly? Is it redistricting reform? Is it ethics reform? I mean, clearly Governor Cuomo has said that he is committed to all of these things, but it's possible that he's committed to a lot, in particular the budget, which is a big lift. Not everything potentially may get done.
I mean, our number one issue is redistricting reform, just like Ed Koch. We believe that that's the linchpin that really is the cause for much of the dysfunction and much of the gridlock that we see take place. We take away the political manipulation or the power of the legislative leaders to politically manipulate the district lines for partisan advantage. We affect the way in which power is distributed in the Capitol.
And, well, right now we're hearing some noises from the Senate Republicans that perhaps they're not on board, even though they did sign Ed Koch's New York Uprising pledge. We're going to, unfortunately, cut it off right here, but I would like to have you back to talk about redistricting because I know it is going to be a big issue coming up. Thank you very much, Dick
Thank you,
Davey.
Liz.